Katu Veo Wanderers, welcome to the Lost Holotapes channel. We continue to talk about the history of Fallout, settlements and factions. In the last episode we discussed the second act of the history of Appalachia from 2082 to 2086 and ended with the tragedy at Harper's Ferry. Hordes of scorch beasts destroyed the city and made the whole region tremble in fear. The factions needed to unite in a coalition in the war of man and the beast. Did the disparate groups manage to unite against a common enemy? Today we will talk about this. But before, let me remind you obvious thing. If you have missed the previous episodes, it is recommended to watch them first. At an unexpected point of time, but clearly after 2086, the following happens. Most town and treetops fall under the onslaught of scorch beasts. It is known that this happened after the tragedy of Harper's Ferry. In the area of 86-87, fire breathers posts in Welch and Beckley were abandoned. Melody Larkin informs Hen Madigan about them and Lewisburg, what puts the downfall of the settlements in an adjacent time period as of Lewisburg's. A starving group of refugees from Harper's Ferry, led by Brianna Hawke, raids the cabin of the Sunday brothers. The personal conflict between Jesus Sunday and Brianna over Jesus' brother JD adds to the spatial acuteness of the situation. During the raid, a fire starts, which destroys all the Sunday farms. In the fire, as well as due to the result of a shootout, everyone dies. Margie McClintock, the leader of the diehards, is increasingly depressed after the disappearance of the palace. She reached the ultimate point, takes a bag of chems and goes to get her last trip. Meg Groberg, a member of the group, suggests that the raiders should leave the region as it becomes too dangerous because of the scorch beasts. Judging by the absence of any further recordings, the whole group left around 86-87. Different factions are starting to work on fighting the scorch beasts. For example, Free States, with the hands of Abby and her father Niraj Singh, invent a system for detecting and luring scorch beasts, setting traps for them. Hank Madigan of Fire Breathers gets excavator armor and ultra-seat weapons from the headquarters of the AMC in Watoga. Brotherhood of Steel builds anti-aircraft installations and organizes containment camps around the perimeter of Cranberry Bog. Firebases Hancock, Major, LT, Thorn forward stations Alpha, Delta and drop site V9. In addition, Brotherhood begins to break the alliance with responders in Free States, brazenly taking away their resources and technologies to make up for their own excised ones. They thought that they could handle the Scorch Beast on their own and they didn't have time to play politics and trade. Responders and the remnants of Free States were unpleasantly surprised by such shamelessness of Brotherhood. End of April of 2088, a group of cutthroats in the Big Bend tunnel, who had lost touch with their leadership, are surprised to find a camp of the Brotherhood at the Big Bend's east entrance, with whom they negotiate a small trade. The Brotherhood's outpost perceived them as an independent community, unrelated to the raiders. Such a recognition affects them, and they decide to completely retire and become just a settlement. Their group became known as Benders. 2091, there is a mutiny in Vault 79 organized by Agent Shorty. Many died in this battle, but the rebels failed to achieve success. Before 2093, under the onslaught of Sierra Bravos, the so-called Scorch Beast by the Brotherhood, Brotherhood leaves all its positions to concentrate all its forces on its four main bases: Camp Venture, Fort Defiance, Big Bend East and Thunder Mount. Thus they lose forward bases Alpha, Delta, fire bases Major, Hancock, LT, Thorn, outposts of Spruce Knob, Grafton Dam and Huntersville, and drop site V9. At the same time, super mutants scattered across the wasteland return to Huntersville. In the catacomb of the Barrow settlement, a squad of Brotherhood Scout dies, who try to track down the cause of the accumulation of a huge number of robots in the sewers of Harper's Ferry. In addition, the Brotherhood conducts a research trying to invent some kind of poison at the University of Morgantown, but the Montgomery squad doing this dies and fails to complete the work. After that, despite the requests of scribe Grant McNamara, the leadership of the Brotherhood refused to carry out this operation again. And that was in vain, because perhaps it would have helped them in the war. Roger Maxon knew about the problem of the Scorch Beast and strictly forbade the use of nuclear charges, which Brotherhood also somehow found out about. This ban greatly undermined the relationship between the West Coast and Appalachia, which was already on the verge of despair from constant losses and minimal success in the war with the Scorch Beasts. However, the connection itself began to gradually break off as the satellite providing it slowly began to go out of orbit. In the end, it falls and Maxon sends first expeditionary force led by Layla Rahmani to Appalachia. In the future, when passing through the Rocky Mountains, the connection with them will also be lost. This expedition is officially the first expedition of the Brotherhood of Steel. July 20, 2093, the Brotherhood of Steel leaves Camp Venture. Only Fort Defiance, Thunder Mountain and Big Bend East remain. November/December, the Battle of Grafton takes place and responders lose it. It is not clear with whom the responders fought, but apparently taking advantage of the weakening people in the region, super mutants began to increase their power and probably attack the settlement. Flatwoods constantly experiences its own difficulties with wild animals. In the period from 2093 to 2096, 8 people died from paws and teeth. In addition, Flatwoods faced interruptions in the supply of food, and as a result there was hunger. When trying to set up agricultural production system in the agricultural center of Valtech on the outskirts of the city, security robots were accidentally activated, which by November 11th forced people to completely abandon attempts to even approach the complex. Before 2095, the raiders left Tigert water treatment plant. It is then became occupied by Amy Carey, a scientist who studied water, air and soil to determine how the scorch virus affects the environment. From January 29th to February 2nd, the Brotherhood conducted Operation Touchdown. Elizabeth Taggarty, Johnny Moreno and the rest of the Brotherhood's best fighters marched through Cranberry Bog into the Glass Caverns, establishing temporary survey camp Alpha and losing people along the way. They tried to blow out the keys to block the Scorch Beast's exit routes to the surface. The mission was essentially suicidal. Although the mission was completed, the whole squad died. After that, the number of Scorch Beasts began to decrease, so everyone thought that the operation was a real victory. In the Brotherhood, the leadership was taken by Scribe McNamara and Paladin Ted Wilson. The inventor of the Scorch Beast detection system, Niraj Singh, dies of the disease at Free States. March the 10th, Fire Breathers raid Brim Quarry, where they discover a new kind of strange and semi-intelligent creatures, mole miners. Moles are mutated former miners who live almost only in the region of the ash heap. Semi-intelligent, living underground, aggressive towards everyone who is not them. They can interact with each other, have a primitive language of communication, use firearms, and one of the moles is even a vendor in the game, which certainly suggests that they are much closer to a definition of a new race as supermutants, rather than to the feral ghouls. A group of firebreathers did not organize a post and left although they cleaned the mine. Later, the moles returned and retook control of the mine again. March 12th, due to unwillingness of responders to give out Amy Carey's research even under the threat of physical violence, the alliance of the Brotherhood of Steel and responders is finally breaking apart. On June the 3rd, Scorch Beasts became active again. With even more frenzy, they break out to the surface and begin hunting. The Brotherhood of Steel abandons their camp at the Big Bend East and evacuates to Fort Defiance, preparing for a long siege. McNamara again demands permission to conduct a research in the university from Ted Wilson, but again receives a refusal, reasoned by the fact that there are already few people left. In the coming battle, everyone is needed. Throughout the summer, the Brotherhood of Steel has been besieged both at Fort Defiance and at the Thunder Mountain, gradually losing people and defensive equipment, until Fort Defiance falls on August 11th and Thunder Mountain on the 19th. The Brotherhood of Steel Appalachia is exterminated. Before 2096, a plethora of camps and outposts of raiders were established, and it is unknown when they actually appeared and disappeared. However, by 2096 it is already clear that they have been destroyed or abandoned. Among them are The Freak Show, Johnson's Acre, Vantage, Schoolborn Vantage, Reaper Alley, Cliffwatch, Clarksburg, Knife Edge, River Treehouse, Camp and Den Sons Construction, Crashed Plane in the Mire. Considering that the raiders ignored the danger from the Scorched Beast to the last and the lack of evidence of fighting them in the camps, I think that all those camps actually died even earlier. The same is applied to Cutthroat's camps though, such as North and South camps, Bleeding Cave, Grindhouse and the Sludge Hole. Everything was great for supermutants. Somehow they restored the population and continued to spread over the mountains, as well as descend down to the plains to the west and east, because the Scorch virus didn't affect them. They seized not only Grafton from responders, but also Horizon West, devouring its inhabitants. Before 2096, Fire Breathers had their own tragedy. In the course of the unsuccessful exam for joining the division held in the Betty Belch mine, the entire squad of examinees died, opposing the Scorched ones. What is actually strange, since it was too early for them to appear in Ash Heap at that time. Ironhold Homestead, living apart from everyone, dies as a result of the conflict between the brothers. It is known that they saw Scorched Beasts, so they died around 2096. The year of 2096 was the last year of life for the human population in the region. The denouement of the war with the Scorched Beast has come. In fact, this final act is described very confusingly because the chronology of many fundamentally important events in various sources of lore is sometimes given with contradictions or geographical illogicalities. What happened this year is probably the most speculative part of the entire history of Appalachia. After the fall of Brotherhood of Steel, Scorched Beasts began to fly more and more actively to the east into the mountains, threatening raiders and settlers in the forest beyond the mountains. The only remaining group of dissidents in the region are Cutthroats. Unlike them, responders took the danger from the Scorched seriously. Fire Breathers understand that impassable mountains in principle more or less restrain the hordes of the Scorched, but the weak point for the breakthrough is the Big Bend railway tunnel passing under the mountains, connecting the plains of the forest and Cranberry Bog. Then they decide to blow up the tunnels, but before that Hank had to go as a scout to still survive in Free States. In the spring, Hank gets to the Free States bunkers but accidentally damages the Scorched Beast's identification system. Together with them, he develops a plan according to which he had to deliver a radio receiver or something to the highest point of Appalachia, to the top of the world building, which is a part of Pleasant Valley Resort. After the activation, the system of recognition luring, destroying Scorched Beasts could cover the entire region, and it would become much easier for people to fight with Scorched Beasts, and, for example, the tourists would be able to recognize only the Scorched. But Hank fails to fulfill his mission. When he reached the top of the world, David Thorpe, who still foolishly adheres to the no-negotiations policy, kills him, condemning the entire region to imminent death. The last representatives of Free States, not waiting for the result of Hank's mission and cut off from the rest of the region, are gradually dying out. Abigail Singh followed Hank to the top of the world, but did not reach it. Ella Ames died during a scout mission, and Raleigh Clay just disappeared. After the arrogant cutthroat killed Hank, they themselves were doomed as well. In the spring, hordes of Scorched Beasts staged a Valkyrie flight to Pleasant Valley, infecting and killing raiders. Cutthroats were not able to resist such an opponent who caught them by surprise. David Thorpe himself became scorched. I admit that despite the fact that Pleasant Valley was destroyed, Cutthroats still had outposts of Summersville Dam, Sutton and the Charleston capital in their possession, since at that time the Scorched Beasts had not yet attacked the plain west of the mountains. Nevertheless, some of the raiders were able to evacuate, descending from the mountains to the west and in a stampede capturing some locations along the way. A couple of days after the fall of Pleasant Valley, two survivors came to the Big Bend Tunnel and told the Benders about what happened there, but the Benders didn't have time to evacuate as hordes of Scorched broke into the tunnel from the east and destroyed the settlement. July the 6th, Claire Hudson, a medical scientist of Responders, begins to develop a vaccine at the AVR Medical Center. Fire breathers are very much counting on this vaccine because the Scorched are already beginning to seep through the Big Bend Tunnel and spread through the western part of the region. Without the vaccine, they would not have been able to get inside the tunnel to set up the charges and detonate them. They were also still waiting for Hank and the success of his mission. It is not clear when and under what circumstances, perhaps not even in this period of timeline, but the settlements of New Gad and Summersville Dock died. Perhaps they were seized by super mutants, perhaps the Scorched broke through, maybe before the fall of Morgantown, maybe later, but it is known for sure that the super mutants captured the outpost of North Kanava Lookout of Responders, devouring its patrollers. And now the mess with Flatwoods begins. It is known that until June 15th, all Responders at the call of Maria Chavez left their posts to come to the support of Morgantown, which slowly began to move into a state of siege. Accordingly, Responders leave Flatwoods, Point Pleasant and Camden Park. There is a World Medical Journal in Flatwoods which states that there are no responders in the city at all, but the presence of corpses of responders in the city suggests that they seemingly return later. On July 24th, Morgantown repulsed the first wave of Scorched Beasts. There are significant losses. Until August the 1st, there is some kind of fight in some Free States bunker, judging by the log entry in Flatwoods, which was made by a man who left the bunker and went to the Allegheny Asylum. It is not very logical, although it is not clear why he made such a detour, because Brotherhood's Fort Defiance has already been fallen for a year, but it is quite possible that there really was a fight in an undefined bunker and it was the actual end of Free States. On August the 12th, the Scorched flooded AVR Center in Charleston and left, scaring Claire Hudson. If we take this date as the relative speed of the advance of the Scorched to the north, then somewhere at the same time the outposts of Cutthroats located nearby are dying. The Dam, the capital, and later Sutton finally destroying the raiders. The evidence of this is the group of Scorched on the territory of these locations and the traces of their attack. The last message that indicates the absence of responders in Flatwoods is dated by September the 1st. It means that after this date they returned and missed the final battle of Morgantown, since the corpses of the responders are present in the settlement. Cullen MacLeader, who then went to Morgantown, left the record and, strangely, didn't cross paths with either responders returning back to Flatwoods or with responders in Morgantown, which had already died out by his arrival in the city. Probably he left Flatwoods on September the 1st, made a big detour in 2 months and came to Morgantown just after the final battle. This is the only possible explanation that doesn't contradict the chronology of events. On October 20th, Claire gives up trying to invent a vaccine against Scorch virus and leaves the laboratory. Firebreathers leave their camp of Rusty Peak Bar in Charleston Fire Department and move to the Big Bend Tunnel to meet their last fight and try for luck to break through hordes of Scorched without a vaccine and Scorched detection system to blow up the tunnels. Unfortunately, they do not succeed and perish. November the 5th, the last mark of Dasa Ben-Ami in the journal. The raiders, driven by the scourge, passed through flatwoods and destroyed the settlement, as evidenced by the presence of their corpses in the city. Also, the raiders seized Camden Park, but later they themselves die for some unknown reason. November the 7th, the final battle for Morgantown begins. A horde of Scorch Beasts and Scorched besiege the city. Unfortunately, the story doesn't have a successful conclusion. All people died out. It can be assumed that with the fall of Morgantown, the active presence of people in the region ceased. Only a couple of isolated groups remained. A tragic story awaited people in Appalachia. The Scorch Beasts practically exterminated them all, but as a rule, after the black stripe comes the white one. Thanks to the efforts of the dwellers of Vault 76, the threat of Scorch Beast was eliminated after 6 years, but we will talk about this in the next episode. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, subscribe, hit the bell and leave a comment. That will definitely help the project. Also check all the links below. They include the Google Earth map, the lore compendium and the text version of this video. Also, the text version includes the statistics of settlements and factions for those who love numbers. That's all for today. If you see a Scorched one, don't play hero and run for your life, so that I will see you in the Wastelands, Lone Wanderers. Fishers out.